Hello everyone, it's Helen here with Helping with Helen. Thanks for joining me for today's video. Today's video is going to be a very difficult video for me to make, although I felt in my heart that it was the right thing to do. This morning I attended a funeral for a dear friend whose son was tragically in a car crash a little over a week ago, and he was killed. I can't even put into words the pain that I feel for them right now, the whole entire family, for the father, the mother, the grandparents, the brothers, the aunts, the uncles. To witness what I witnessed today, that kind of pain will stick with me forever. I go back over this last week though, and I see God's hands even in the midst of tragedy. I see the way that the family rallied together to comfort one another. And it just, again, testifies of God's goodness, because here in the worst of times, the worst tragedy that any of us could ever imagine, they sat there and cried together. They loved each other. They leaned on each other. And just to see them as a whole unit come together, I do truly believe that if God did not give us the strength and come in and cover us in these moments, that it's the kind of pain that would take people out genuinely. A few days ago, we stopped by the house and only a handful of them were there because some of them were at the viewing, to see this beautiful young man. And I went in to hug one of the brothers that I hadn't met before, one of the brothers of the young man who had passed away. And I could feel his pain coming off of him, literally, genuinely. Like it was seeping out of him, and he was shaking. And when I wanted to hug him, his heart was beating so fast that I genuinely thought, oh, his heart could stop. He was so devastated. And the same thing happened today at the funeral as the two brothers. Keep in mind, one's only 21. I believe the other one's 18. And like I said, the other one who just passed away in the car crash was just barely 20 years old. And the dad went up with them to just hold them in place because they were all shaking and crying and hurting. And the one brother that I had hugged the other day, where I could just feel his heart pounding out, he said, I was the last one to talk to my brother. And so that's going to forever be his memory. And he said, however, I want you guys to know that we had the best weekend together because he came up to visit me. So he had been on a road trip visiting his brother. And he proceeded to tell us just the beauty of like the time that they'd spent together, how they laughed and they went shopping and got new boots, and they rented a pontoon boat. They went fishing, the boat stalled, it got stuck on the water. But then he proceeded to talk about the life that his brother lived, because this kid was so full of life. And he said, he laughed about it. He jumped into the freezing cold water, even convinced me that it wasn't that cold so that I would jump in. And he's just like, I will forever cherish those moments and those laughs that we had and that time that we had together. And then he said that the last text that he received was from his brother that night as his brother was driving home, and that's when he was killed. And it said, hey, I just want to let you know that I had a great time with you, bro. And he said that he was sleeping at that time, and that that he wasn't able to respond. But he said, I hope that he knows that I had a great time too. And, of course he knows. Now he knows because he's home with God. Guys, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make this video, and I'm not going to cry through the whole thing, but there was just so much pain there and still beauty at the same time. Isn't that like God? And the other brother talked as well and just said, he was my best friend and I hope he'll forgive me. Isn't that something that we all carry with ourselves when we lose loved ones, like guilt and shame and all these things, because we think we have forever? And my goodness, forgive them for what? They were brothers and they had the greatest of love for each other. But he was feeling probably guilty, maybe. I don't know what he was asking for forgiveness for there, but maybe like boys do, they fight or they have words or, they're brothers, right? But oh my goodness, I just pray that God will come in and be like, forgive you. You're so forgiven. He loved his brother more than anything. They were all three of them best friends in the whole world. But it just shows like, the different processes and the different things that we go through as we lose someone. You've got the one brother here who is dealing with the fact that he was the last one to see his brother. You've got the other brother here who's the oldest brother who's just falling apart, just like, just like he was my best friend, and I hope that he'll forgive me. Like, and, so the things that I sometimes believe the enemy puts on us, that guilt and shame, it's just like, of course, he would forgive you for anything that you ever said or did, it's just, to me, it's just like, oh, he would do anything just to give him a hug. I know he would. And the brother who's in heaven, he's probably comforting him right now, like, don't you even think about that, but it's just, you could just feel the closeness up there. And as the dad had to wrap his arms around his two boys and the mom in the front row and the aunts and the uncles and the grandparents, and then this beautiful slideshow. I wanted to talk about this for a second, but this young man barely turning 20 years old, and this slideshow showed life, like real life, like obviously we see them from when they were a baby and they were a kid and all those things, but somebody who truly knew how to live. Like there were pictures of him jumping off of cliffs and on four-wheelers and hunting and fishing and going to dances and being wild and crazy and just doing all the things that you would want your young son or your young daughter to do. And I sat there and watched slide after slide as they were playing through the music, which was amazing. And it was just like, you lived. You did something that so many people truly don't. People who are living right now who just take the days for granted, who don't do anything. They murmur, they complain, they give up, for whatever reason. But I looked at this slideshow and I'm like, in 20 years, you got it right. You lived your life to the fullest. And even the story that the brother said, how he just jumped off on the edge of the boat into the freezing cold water, and how he laughed as they were getting towed back in, but how he was excited that he was going to get his $100 back. It's just all these things. But I sat there and looked at these pictures and I'm just like, you got it right. You got it right. And God gave us this beautiful glimpse of this beautiful young man, this soul. And if we can have a takeaway from any of it, it's like, let's live like this young man. He was a hard worker. He was always willing to try new things. In fact, just a few short months ago, he came down to my office and he got out of his truck. And I mean, I've met him a handful of times. I wasn't quite as close to the son as I am to his father, but he got out of his truck down at my office, and I could just tell by looking at him, I'm like, you're different. You're special. Like, I knew right away there was something super special about this kid. And he gets out of his truck and we go up to my office. I have all these boxes of all this crazy furniture. And I'm like, I'll throw you a few $100s and some pizza. Will that work? And the fact that he was even willing, because at that time he would have been 19, willing to take on that challenge and even do it. And he did it like with a smile. He stayed there from about noon that day until 9 o'clock that night, putting together office furniture for me. And just in itself, I just was like, wow, what kid does that, for one? And I mean, he just did it just like with a smile. He was laid back about it. He was willing to learn. He'd never done that before, but that's who he was. He was that kid. He was always taking on new things. He would snowblow my mom's yard ever since my dad passed away. So he'd come over and he'd snowblow. He got on her roof this year to change out the air conditioner. I know he was working with his uncle. He just took on a job to become an apprentice plumber. He was just so full of life and willingness and just, I don't know. To me, it's just like, it just speaks volumes. And so the last thing I want to say about it, though, is that the pastor today summed it all up. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. The service couldn't have been more beautiful. And the pastor, he brought something up that I think probably anybody who's had loss will ask. And that is why? Why? He talked about that. He actually was brave enough to say that. He said, I know a lot of you are asking why. That's the question. Like, yeah, we get it. He's in heaven. He's somewhere better. That's what you say. However, we want him here. We miss him here. Why? And he said, that's okay to ask that question. He goes, do ask that question. Do ask God that question. It's okay to ask God that question. I think so often we're afraid to ask God that question, but the truth is who better than to ask that question than God? You may not get your answer, that's for sure, but you may. And if nothing else, you're going to get a lot of love. And I do know in time he will give you peace and he will take care of you and he will do something so beautiful out of your pain and out of your hurt until you are with your loved one again. But the pastor said, it's okay to ask why. It's okay to be sad and it's okay to be angry and it's okay to have these emotions. God created these emotions. And then he went on to talk about how Jesus wept. Those two words, Jesus wept in the Bible. Jesus wept over his best friend who had died. He wept with the people around him that were mourning and they were sad and they were hurting. And that just shows right there that Jesus is with us. Jesus was with him that night when he got in that crash. He's been with his brothers. He's been with the family ever since. He is with you. And when he said that Jesus wept, it's just like, that makes perfect sense. It's like Jesus cried too. Jesus feels what we feel too. He was there with his best friend when it happened. He was there with them. And not only that Jesus even asked God, there was a time where he was so distraught right before he died, where he was just like, God, why have you forsaken me? How often do you go through a trial where you feel like, God, where are you? How could you have let this happen? How could you have forsaken me? How could you have left me here to do this on my own, or left me here and taken my loved one that had barely gotten started with this life? It's okay to ask that question. It's okay to think those things. It's okay to feel those things. The main thing is give it to God. Go to God with all of it, because you're going to need to go to him every single day. And I do believe he's going to comfort you and get you through it, just like he already is with their family, just seeing them leaning on each other and loving on each other and having to be strong for one another. Even the oldest brother, who's 21, I seen a young man arising, probably much too soon, but sitting there trying to comfort people, take care of people. The other day, as people were dropping off food and doing different things, he was taking charge. He was mature. He was standing strong because he knew that he had to become the man. He had to be that man that day. And I do believe God gives you that strength. And he gives you that peace that surpasses all understanding in these most tragic moments. But my point was it's okay. It's okay to be sad, and it's okay to ask God why, and it's okay to wonder, like, God, where are you at in the midst of it? But I can promise you that God is there, and God loves our children more than we could ever love them. And I do believe he gives us a glimpse. And sometimes he takes them back home to him. So he's like, this is yours. This will be yours forever. I wanted to share it with you for a minute. But him or her, they're going to come home and be safe with me until you come up here too. So anyways, guys, sorry. I just wanted to share that.